Hey, what's going on, people? Hope you guys are doing good. So today we're going to be comparing the Galaxy S23 Ultra to the Galaxy S24 Ultra and doing a quick camera test. This isn't going to be my final verdict by any means because I really feel like the Galaxy S24 Ultra needs quite a bit of work and there is an update coming. I just don't know when. So I'll do my final verdict and my final camera review once that update comes out. But for now, I just wanted to get something out there so that way you could see, give you an idea of what to expect when you receive your Galaxy S24 Ultra, especially if you're upgrading from the S23 Ultra. And this is a quick front-facing video test, so let me know what you think. Right now, it seems many people are divided on the S24 Ultra, with some saying it's a huge improvement, while others are saying it's actually worse than the S23 Ultra. Based on my short experience, I can honestly say I'm siding with the second group a little bit more, specifically when it comes to video recording. During the day, both phones perform well, but there is a clear difference in processing. The S23 Ultra typically produces a sharper image with more contrast. You can see exactly what I mean in this clip right here. The S23 Ultra is also more consistent with color reproduction. For example, look at the sky in the next few clips. The S24 Ultra is more of a turquoise color, whereas the S23 Ultra displays a much more accurate representation. Initially, I thought this was due to a color processing or white balance issue. However, I'm able to reproduce the same problem on the S23 Ultra. If I were to take the S23 Ultra clip and increase the highlights, you can see that the sky starts to shift colors, and it matches the S24 Ultra perfectly. This proves my theory that the S24 Ultra's biggest issue right now is exposure processing. When recording video, it's simply overexposing the majority of shots taken from the main camera. Here's another example of the overexposure issue, which you can clearly see in the sky. While both phones are clipping, there is slightly more detail on the S23 Ultra. This same thing can be said about skin tones. Take a look at this shot where the Galaxy S24 Ultra boosted the exposure so much it took away details from the skin. Remember in the beginning when I said that the S24 Ultra produces an image with less contrast and sharpness? Well, sometimes this works in its favor. Take this flower shot, for example. Immediately, I can see that the S23 Ultra isn't just sharper, it's over-sharpened. Meanwhile, the S24 Ultra looks a bit more pleasing to the eye, even if it overexposed the image slightly. This sharpness issue can also be seen in 8K video. Images appear softer from a distance, but when zooming in, you realize there's plenty of detail, whereas the S23 Ultra appears over-sharpened. The Galaxy S24 Ultra can also record 8K using the 5x telephoto camera, whereas the S23 Ultra can only record 4K due to it being a 12-megapixel sensor. Now, before you get excited, take a look at how 4K compares to the 8K. It's not awful, but it is pretty bad. I thought maybe it was doing a digital crop, that's the reason why it was so soft, so I performed the same test again, but this time I used the main sensor and digitally zoomed to 5x. And for a benchmark, I've recorded the same image in 4K using the 5x telephoto. Look at how different each of these images appear, all taken from the same phone. This is just more proof that the S24 Ultra really needs an optimization update. Lens flares can be a problem, especially on phones like the iPhone. However, both the Galaxy S23 Ultra and S24 Ultra handle lens flares really well. The S24 Ultra has a more artistic look to it, but that's simply because it's overexposing the image. 4K 60 frames per second looks great on both. There's really no difference outside of the processing issues we've already discussed, but overall, it's pretty solid. The S24 Ultra can also record 4K at 120 frames per second slow motion, whereas the S23 Ultra is limited to 1080p only. But if I'm being honest, even the 1080p looks really good here. What's funny is when recording in 120 frames per second, you either need to be in Pro mode or slow motion on the Galaxy S24 Ultra. I use Pro mode for both phones and I kept all of the settings in auto. As you can see, the S24 Ultra has a much better processing now. I wanted to find out if this was consistent, so I took a few more clips in different frame rates to test out my theory. To test this out, I took multiple shots from the same exact angle using the standard video mode and the Pro video mode on the Galaxy S24 Ultra, and as expected, there is a clear difference in exposure processing. You can see Pro Video mode is doing a much better job. One thing I wasn't expecting is just how good the S24 Ultra's standard stabilization is compared to the S23 Ultra. It's super solid and it reminds me of the iPhone 15 Pro and 15 Pro Max, but you really need to be moving in order to see the difference. For example, this clip here, both phones look the same. Here's another example of portrait video. Again, the S24 Ultra is less contrasty and has a harder time keeping things separated. The ironic thing is both of these were set to a blur level of 4, and the S23 Ultra's background looks way less blurry. Also, look at the phone. The S23 Ultra exposed perfectly, whereas the S24 Ultra completely overexposed it. After coming to the conclusion of the overexposure issue, I wanted to see if it had worse purple fringing, which is caused by shooting directly into light. The good thing is there's no difference. The bad thing is both are pretty bad and exhibit horrible fringing in the tree branches when shooting directly into sunlight. Lastly, I tested out the 5x telephoto on the Galaxy S24 Ultra compared to the digital crop on the S23 Ultra, and as expected, the S24 Ultra looks much better. I did the same thing for the 10x telephoto since the S23 Ultra has a physical 10x camera, and as expected, it performed better. But the S24 Ultra still looks good considering this is a digital crop. I would be okay using this for sure. Switching things over to low light, we have more of the same except we're adding a few new issues. On top of overexposing, the S24 Ultra is consistently increasing the contrast while adding saturation. On top of that, the noise reduction is being applied way too aggressively. What's funny is despite the noise reduction being too much, due to how bad it overexposes, the S24 Ultra still ends up with more noise in the sky and shadows than the S23 Ultra, as you can see here. It also looks like the S24 Ultra is adding this weird green hue to the images shot in low light. There were a few times when the colors seemed to match better, but even when you look at the window here, you can see the S24 Ultra is still overexposing. Here's another example of portrait video. This time it's shot in a dimly lit restaurant. This time the S24 Ultra underexposed and oversaturated the image. Let me just prove it. After adjusting the exposure and saturation on the S23 Ultra clip, you can see they almost match, and this is without messing with the white balance and tint. Also, look at how bad the S24 Ultra is doing separating Kevin from the background. I have a few more clips here that further demonstrate the processing issues on the S24 Ultra. Pay attention to the exposure, blooming, sharpness, and noise. Can you see it? Look at the trees and the pavement. The S24 Ultra is applying a heavy noise reduction. Take a look at this shot where I was testing the exposure and nighttime stabilization. It somehow managed to properly expose some parts of the image while also overexposing. It has terrible chroma noise around the light sources, plus the blooming in the sky combined with the heavy lifting of shadows resulting in more noise, whereas the S23 Ultra has plenty of detail while retaining a noise-free pitch black sky. Here's a couple more examples of the S24 Ultra applying too much noise reduction resulting in a softer image. The final low light test I want to leave you with are these two, where I put the optical 10x zoom on the S23 Ultra up against the digital 10x zoom of the S24 Ultra. Please explain this to me. Out of all the times to shine, the S24 Ultra decided its digital zoom was going to perform significantly better than the optical zoom. Before you say anything, I know in low light situations, Samsung phones will use optical telephotos, and that results in a crop on the main sensor. However, you can download Camera Assistant and disable this from happening, which I did on both phones, and I got these results. Okay, so I'm gonna end this video going through the photos that I told you about in the beginning, but I'm not gonna give you my thoughts on them because I didn't take enough to give you a thorough breakdown. However, my thoughts when it comes to video are simply that the S24 Ultra is in desperate need of an optimization update, and hopefully that update comes sooner than later. As you're taking a look at these photos, you can see we are having that same exposure issue, but it's nowhere near as bad as it is in video. The good thing is, if you're currently an S23 Ultra user and primarily a video shooter, you're not missing out on much. And this is a testament to how much work Samsung put in when it comes to supporting the S23 Ultra and delivering constant camera optimization updates. And hopefully we see that same momentum with the S24 Ultra, because I can't wait to see where this camera system is going to be in a few months. And that's something that you really need to remember if you're on the fence about buying this phone. The S24 Ultra is without a doubt a great phone, and in many ways it is better than the S23 Ultra. Just because the camera is performing the way it is today doesn't mean it's going to be the same a month from now. But hey, these are my thoughts. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. I really hope you enjoyed the video. Other than that, I'll see you beautiful people in the next one.